normally at our consultative meeting. We was called into a consultative meeting by the deputy manager, Mr. Peter Hughes, and he told us that he adjourned the meeting that with all unions on that day got to be on standby to meet him, because he'd got to go to Edwinstowe for a special meeting of all the managers of the pits in Nottinghamshire. Our manager Ian Clayton was away on business in London, and we was told to be on standby, so we're all on standby for this meeting, and they fetched us in late in the afternoon. Peter Hughes, to say he was shocked on the news that he told us, it sent everybody into shock, because we just did not believe what was happening at all.
Well, the months leading up to it, the story we were getting was the industry was over capacity and there was going to be some closures, and it didn't matter if you were a productive mine or not, it depended which group of pits you were in, so you could be fortunate or unfortunate. I was at Bilsthorpe, which was quite a good productive mine at the time, but unfortunately we're surrounded by Thoresby and Ollerton, and Thoresby was a big mine and Ollerton was a big mine, and Bilsthorpe was probably the smallest out of them, and we had the least reserves out of the three mines. So although we were productive and we thought we were a good mine with a good infrastructure, we were still understandably nervous that we might be one of the ones to be culled. But we hoped and prayed that because of our good record, and it was always a good pit for industrial relations and men in management, and it was productive, as I said earlier, we'd escape it.
There have been loads of rumours about not wanting coal, they were bringing coal in from Australia and different places, and they were looking at it, but Silverhill seemed to be doing quite well at the time.
From my own point of view as a member of management, I remember they made the announcement, and after the initial shock set in, you start worrying what's going to happen next. You know, the workmen and the management were all in the same boat. Are we going to have a job? Are they going to transfer us? Are we going to be made redundant? All this goes through your head. So we were sitting extremely worried.
We were running 3 phases at the time. We got a new one ready to come on stream, all just been kitted out, finishing being kitted out, and all chocks and machinery on it, and we was moving on to this new phase that was going to pull us into full profit. And it was all geared up, ready to be going. What they did on that day, they closed it down. We met each shift as it was coming on. The afternoon shift had already gone down. They came out and we met them. We met the twilight shift and told them they weren't allowed to go down. The afternoon shift came out, and the night shift, we met them. Every shift we met, and they was told they couldn't go down. Production had ceased straight away.
Did you have them special editions of the coal news?
Yes, we had different things come out, loads of papers, but the special edition of the coal news came out within, I would say, hours really. It must have been planned way in advance.
The first thing I remember is the group HR manager coming out to the mine and sitting us all down in the conference room and talking to us all. This was the management team, and saying, if any are interested in your figures, we'd be happy to give them. It doesn't commit you into leaving, but it would let you know what you're worth, and it might give you time to weigh up your options. Is there anybody here interested? And I remember thinking, keep your hand down. And 4 guys in the room said, well, we're not saying they'd like to leave, but we'd like to see our figures. They had their figures and were gone in 2 weeks.
What sort of age group were these? Were they be older than you?
No, these were younger than me.
All right.
These were guys, they were under managers basically.
Because you'd be in your mid-30s or
I was
mid-30s?
mid-30s, so they would be late 20s, early 30s. But I think their logic was, at their time, they could get a good payoff. It would maybe help pay off their mortgage. And although they could get a job outside, they'd have their mortgage paid, or nearly paid. They could get another career which might not be as well paid, but they'd have longevity. Whereas if they stayed with it, they might not have a long career. So everybody had a different perspective on it.
They dangled a carrot. There were some young people that had only been in the mine working at the pit for 3 years. They was automatically offered the redundancy terms plus £10,000, and it was a big temptation for young men. They was openly pushed into it, you know, young man getting that kind of money. and it caused a lot of problems for them because they'd never had money like that. A lot of them had never had money in the bank, you know, at 22, 23 years old.
As things developed that week, Alan, it ended up into a special consultative Silverhill, didn't it, along with 9 other pits.
Yeah.
There were 10 went into extended review, weren't they?
What we did, we along with the officials from Bury Hall, they took a court injunction out, and all the men had to do was sign on. Each shift was supposed to go at the shift time and sign on. But the men
This was to get the wages.
This was
just the basic wage.
Yeah, just to get their basic wages.
What were the reaction of the other unions at the pit then, Alan? NACODs and whoever were in NUM?
They was all devastated. They just didn't understand it. It was such a shock. Along with the NACODs and the UDM and the COSA, I think it was called COSA.
Yeah.
They all got theirs together, and this is when we all took this injunction out, and we went to the High Court in London. And
because what was happening, they wasn't giving you the official 90 days consultation period, was they?
That's correct, got to have 90 days.
Well, what they basically did is they rescinded the plans and everything was on ice. So we were back in tender hooks. We weren't closing, we weren't opening, everything was just shelved for the time being, so we weren't quite sure where we were going.
This was pending the review, the government review.
This was the government review. So we were going hell for leather to try and make the pit still look attractive.
Yeah.
We were lucky, we had a good workforce and we had good management and we had quite good relations. And basically at that time, because of the situation, it pulled you closer together and you became more like a family.
Yeah.
Because you were all fighting against the enemy which was outside.
Yeah.
So you had to pull together and it was a survival. Now you go one of two ways when you're in that position. You either end up bickering, fighting as management and workforce, and the pit goes downhill very quickly, or you decide to pull together. Now Bob Robson was a kind of different type of manager, and his forte was really people, and he was very, very good with men, and he was good at getting men enthused, and I think it's fair to say that he got the workforce behind him and we all pulled together, and he encouraged us as management not to be antagonistic with the men, but to go and work with them and try and help them.
Yeah.
And if there's a problem, instead of going down and saying it's his fault and else's fault, we'd to find a way out of it.
Yeah. Which was similar to what happened the pit I worked at, Ansel Benting did very similar, same, got bit between teeth as I say and went for it.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, we got bit between teeth. So we were working hell for leather to try to keep the pit going, and we were all working extremely hard. The plan at Bilsthorpe wasn't just straight, we're going to shut the pit down. The plan was, we were going to close down parts of the mine and leave the park gate seam open. So Bilsthorpe was still open as a satellite colliery. There'd be a small team at it, which I was invited to be part of, and we would develop the park gate and couple through to Thorsby colliery.
So yeah, you're talking about like what they call a sacrificial lamb?
Yes, so we would sacrifice our park gate and have it all developed, and we'd block out, I think it was 4 or 5 faces, so that Thorsby, when we coupled through, could come and take that coal, and they'd have 5 faces, which would be roughly about 1.5 million tonnes a face. It set them up for clover for a good 5 or 6 years.
Roy Link, who was the area official from Bury Hall, General Secretary of the UDM, he went on protest at Silverhill, didn't he?
He came in a visit and went underground with the then manager, Ian Clayton, Bert Sage and 1 or 2 more. They had a bit of a trip round, and then Roy, in protest, stayed down in the pit bottom. From then on, all the world and everybody wanted to see Silverhill. I was at the pit very, very early on a Friday morning, and the phone was ringing, and I answered the phone, and I thought it was one of the men underground playing about, and it was a phone call from Australia. They wanted to know about this union man, Roy Link, that was asleep down the pit.
Out for the day in Southern Ireland where I'd been on holiday. My brother-in-law said to me, there'd been some sort of pit accident over in England, and I immediately asked him where, and he couldn't recall. So I said, put the news on. So we put the news on at 6 o'clock, and there was no mention of it. And my wife was saying, settle yourself down, you know, you're on holiday, it's nothing to do, you'll not be your place anyway, there's a lot of pits. But I couldn't settle. And I rang my father, who's Scottish and worked in the mines up in Scotland, because I thought he'll know. When I rang him, he said, "Oh God, I was hoping you wouldn't ring." I said, "Why?" He said, "It's your pit." So I rang the mine, because obviously I had the numbers for the mine. And after a few calls, I get through to a fellow called Keith Williams, who was the deputy manager at Harworth. He'd worked at Bilsthorpe before me, doing the same job, and he'd been drafted in because I'd been on holiday to help, and he gave me the details, and I decided to make my way straight back. So I jumped in the car and drove back to England, and I then got involved. I had a lot of volunteers, but I picked 6 who I knew were pretty strong characters, and they went down and worked with them. And my job was to talk to the rest of the men through the night shift into the day shift, and I was basically like a coordinator to organise and get stuff in the mine, because I knew all the buttons to press to get materials moved, to get stuff done quickly. But I also was quite close to the workforce because of what I'd explained previously. After that happened, we rallied together even more, and we became closer again, and we kept working. And when the time came to do the closures, they actually closed all of them instead of Bilsthorpe. But I think, if I'm being honest, I think because of the publicity we had, and because we'd come back from this disaster and we'd worked together and we kept it going and we wanted to save the pit, I think politically they didn't want to touch us.
It was on the first Sunday. A car pulled up near the uni office, and an old little lady got out and bought a Sunday dinner, and she says it's for that bloke that's sleeping down the pit in protest, and she brought him a Sunday dinner. I went into this committee meeting, and Bert says the branch secretary spoke to them, and we thought we'd won people over, but you can never tell. And then we went down again with Elizabeth Peacock and Winston Churchill, and it turned out to no ends again, nothing. We were gutted, to be quite honest, we was all gutted. It's not just talking from my point of view, everybody was gutted. Then the process then was, we told everybody used to, same as say, they used to come to the pit to sign on. And I did tell people that then, that's it, nothing you could do. I stayed on and worked for Mining Skills for a time, and I worked in the pit bottom, in the shaft. And in the pit bottom, my job, because I was a coal face work and ripper, is we started setting steel in the pit bottom for when they started filling the shafts in. I did that, and week by week they slowly finished more people, and it left just a few that then they filled the shaft in. There was a job shop at Silverhill. They were silly jobs, you know. At the time, a decent hourly wage they thought was about £3 an hour. We'd been earning good money. Our basic wage, if I remember rightly, was £210 a week plus bonus, and we were making good bonuses. And then they were offering jobs at £2, £2.50, £3 an hour. I got my CV done. They did the CV for me professionally. Whenever I presented it, I couldn't get a job.
Because it had connotations of trade unions.
Yeah. So eventually I took it off, and in January, February '94, I think it was, I landed a job at Dacre Lake Paints
in Kirkby.
In Kirkby, Ashfield. And my job was to clean the pots that the paint had been in. And I did that, and then I progressed through to the department where you put paints into tins. And then about a year later I was made a supervisor, and then 6 months to a year later I was made manager of the department. It's not been easy. Once a miner, always a miner, and you never lose it. Wherever they go to work, anybody that's worked in the pits for any length of time, and they go into any other industry, the sense of humour is not the same. typical story for anybody out there that's never done it. Anybody that got injured down a pit, before you put them on the stretcher, and somebody was giving them first aid and was being looked after, you always ask them if they got any snap left. Oranges, any chocolate. Anybody that got injured, you all rallied round. Anybody got killed, what other places would collect the money? Each pit collected money for anybody that got killed. And the last big disaster that we can remember as working was Bilsthorpe.
Bilsthorpe was very successful post-privatisation and did well in the Parkgate and Black Shale through till it finished, and it was a very profitable mine for RGB up until it closed. But my final association with Bilsthorpe came was I was appointed manager in 1998 at Rossington Colliery. It was my first manager's appointment, and when I went to Rossington, the main trunk lines were in a terrible state with 36-inch conveyors, and they were very old and dilapidated. The belt was breaking all the time. So we actually salvaged all the trunk conveyors out of the Parkgate at Bilsthorpe and reinstalled them at Rossington. And it was quite a nice reassociation, because when I went on visits and I was talking to the guys that were doing it, because I sent someone on Ben, I was saying, this is for Willie, I'm not a stranger, and they said, don't worry, and they looked after me well. I'm glad I wasn't a manager pre-privatisation, because there was a lot of political things went off, and I don't think I'd have sat too well in them.
No.
Because my whole ethos was, when I was at a pit, it was to keep my pit going, it was mine. The work, I was very much into, they're my men, this is my pit, I'm responsible for these people. Initially money wasn't such a big problem, because when it was privatised there was large coal stocks, and the pits basically in British Coal had been set up to turn a lot of coal. We had done an awful lot of development with contractors, and so we were a bit ahead with our developments. In the first 3 years of privatisation, it was like always sweet in the garden. We were getting £40 a tonne, developments were ahead, we were making money, the men were getting good money, that was great. After 3 years, we were chucked to the wolves, basically, in the international markets, and our coal price plummeted. And then things got really tight. We started having to cut more manpower, we had to look at our plans, and where you were trying to get ahead of yourself, it was, you had to survive for the next year. And the same logic, if you look at Annesley Benting, Thorsby, Bilsthorpe, Allerton, all those mines, there's coal at them. There's not a pit in this country that's shut without coal reserves. There is always coal. I mean, this is an island of coal.
Oh, yeah.
It's at what price you get it at, and is it economically viable? I think I read a statistic that said we've taken around about 5 or 6% of the total reserves out of the country. Bear in mind, this has been mined since Roman times.
Yeah. Oh.
So if ever there's a will, there's a lot of coal in this country. The big problem we've got now is lack of miners. And it's the same with mine managers. If you look at the under managers and deputy managers and managers now, they're not young.
No.
I remember an under manager's job was a young man's job.
Yeah.
I get my first start under manager's job at about 28-year-old. You know, that would be unheard of now. Most of them are in their 40s.
Yeah.
Not because 28-year-olds now are incompetent, it's because they're not there.
Yeah.
Any mine engineers we produce in this country, and the only place that's doing it, to my recollection, is Royal School of Mines down at Camborne. They go to Australia and South Africa, mainly Australian, and so what we've got leaves the country. That's because there isn't the opportunities in this country, there isn't longevity in this country, you know. So if you're a young lad starting off, if I was one of them starting off now, I'd go off to Australia. Yeah. Just as I moved from Scotland to England to get a longer career and work with new technology.
The equivalent nowadays is moving
to Australia.